Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. On this episode, I'm going to show you guys how to hang a door. Not like this one. I actually didn't hang this door. This is our rental house while we build a house. But anyway, I'm going to show you how to hang a door. I will have to raise the height of the door frames to 8 feet from the standard size. So I'll show you how to do that. Hang a door, casing, baseboard, actually no base shoe on this, so we'll have to scribe to the floor. So let's go check it out. On this particular project, I have to raise all of the openings from 6'8" to 96 inches or 8 feet. And because this is a lower level, none of the openings are structural. So basically it's a matter of marking out the height that I need to add. And I'm using a multi-tool and vacuum to cut out the drywall and remove it. And I'm just adding the height that I need for the rough opening, and anything else would be covered by the casing of the door. So I really could have used a sawzall on this. But one of the bigger reasons I did not is because I like to use a multi-tool and vacuum and keep all of the dust contained. And here you can see how I'm basically just aligning my level with the sides of the opening and marking my vertical cut on the inside of the closet. And again, I take the multi-tool and vacuum and make my cuts on the inside and get ready to prep the opening. There's a couple reasons I like to use a multi-tool, and one is it's easy to contain, and then it's also easy to control. I don't need two hands to use the tool, and if I was using a sawzall, every once in a while it hits something and jumps, and I'm working in a finished space. I don't want to be damaging all the walls. Once I have the whole entire opening cut with the multi-tool, I take a hammer and a pry bar and remove the drywall. Oftentimes it's glued, so you can see me pulling here, trying to knock the adhesive loose. And we'll speed this up real quick so you don't have to sit there and watch me struggle to pull drywall down off of an opening. Got the back side removed, so now it's a little easier to take the front side down. Make sure you hold on to the piece when you're taking it down. Okay, moving on. I always have a vacuum running during a remodel just because there's people living in the space and I don't want to be throwing sawdust everywhere while I'm cutting the rest of it out with a sawzall. I just take my sawzall and cut the existing framing nails out and widen out to the size of my new opening. All right, so we've got that done, and then I'm just gonna take my sawzall and cut the 2x4s that are hanging down into the opening, and then I'll take 2x4 and block in those voids up in the top so I can have something to nail my door to. In this lower level, there were 8 doors that I had to do this to. So once I got a method down, I basically just took and cut out all the drywall all at one time and then went back and hit all the framing. And here are all the door openings, prepped after cutting out all the framing. I still needed to block some of them in, but I did that before I hung on my doors. And this is a fairly large basement. There are 3 bedrooms, so 3 closets, 3 entry doors, and also 2 bathrooms. So now moving on to hanging the doors. These are pre-hung doors, so basically what I do is I will go in 3 to 4 locations in the door jamb itself and put 1 nail. In this, since it's an 8-foot door, I used 4 locations to temp that in. And then what I do is I use that to hold the door into place and go back to those specific locations and use that for fine-tune adjustment on all my doors. And then I will close the door and open it repeatedly until I get my door reveals and alignment where I want them. And I should be videoing this from the inside of the door so you can see the reveals. So I don't really have a great view of this for you on this one, but I'll go through and do a better door hanging video in the future. So what you see me doing here is trying to align the door to the stop, but also having a consistent reveal. So I'm opening and closing the door repeatedly and just checking the stop and how it aligns with the opening. And as usual, I just want to check everything to make sure it's still plumb and good. And then I'm going to go back through and shim everything. Once I get everything close to adjustment, I will usually go back and double check to see if the door is closing properly. And you can usually hear that as well as see it. Once I get everything temp adjusted, I'll go back through and install all my shims. On the strike side, I will do just below or above the strike, and then at the bottom of the door, the top of the door, and then in a middle location in between that. And then on the hinge side, I usually like to put my shims above or below the hinges. That way, when I'm nailing everything off, I'm not trying to nail right where the hinge is. Then I'm just going through and kind of snugging up the shims. I usually want to make sure they're pretty tight, so when I go back through and nail them off, things don't move. But you don't want to make them too tight and bring the door reveals in and then have the door not work properly. So then I'm just nailing off each shim location, and above and below each hinge, I typically will put 2 nails. Once I have everything nailed off, I take my multi-tool and get all the shims flush cut to the... And we'll speed that up because nobody wants to listen to a multi-tool anyway. And once I've got all that done, I pick up my area and clean up for the next task. Boom, just like magic, all the doors are set, checking reveals, checking how they close properly. And these French doors are pretty cool. It has a cool hardware on it that is a magnet instead of a ball catch. So it not only helps with alignment with having a magnet at the top and the bottom of the doors, but it also helps with noise. And with ball catches, I run into issues with them moving a lot. Walking through the doors, and then here's another one of those French door units with the magnets. And I'll show you how nicely it aligns. Usually with ball catches, there's nothing to help hold the doors in alignment at the bottom. So as you can see, with this magnet system, there is a magnet down at the bottom along with an L bracket that holds the door in alignment if one or the other door warps. And just prior to casing, I like to go and close all of my doors just to verify I have adjusted everything properly and check everything one last time. All right, moving on to casing. I had already pre-cut all of this casing. If you watched the last video, I showed you how I pre-cut and brought all of this down into the lower level. So everything was ready to go. All I have to do is take and distribute it to each door. I do it this way because it keeps everything methodical, and all of our doors are going to be basically the same height. All I need to do is measure and cut and put 2 rights and 2 lefts on each door. Okay, moving on to casing, and I even changed my shirt. Just kidding, it was a new day. But anyway, I take my brad nailer and I nail off the inside of the casing against the jamb leg. And I do this because this is all 3/4 material, so I will take and put small nails against the jamb and then the finish nails into the wall to help hold everything tight. And again, being methodical or production style, I'll take and nail off all of the insides against the jambs with my brad nailer, and then I'll go back and nail everything off with my finish nailer. That way I'm not changing guns every 5 seconds. And I'm usually nailing about every 12 to 16 inches. It really kind of depends on the material you're using, along with any movement in drywall or the framing. And I didn't happen to have a little step stool for this project, so I was just rolling around my T-stack to wherever I needed to reach. All right, so I've got all of that finished up, and I'm switching guns to the finish nailer, and I typically have 2.5-inch nails in the gun, nailing off into the stud so I can hold everything tight. As I'm nailing off with this gun, I tried to keep in mind where I nailed in the jamb side with my brad gun, so everything can be pretty uniform and also will give things a better finished product, even if you can see through the paint where the nail holes are. Once I have the legs nailed off, I will go back and measure all of my headers, and I measure from outside to outside because this will give me a long point and it's much easier to measure. Then take that back over to the saw, mark my material, and I usually will straight cut this. That way it's already pre-cut, and then I'll go back and cut my miter right to the edge of that. Oftentimes we will pre-cut and possibly even pre-assemble our materials, but on this one I'm just taking and cutting to length and then checking each miter and adjusting accordingly. And depending on framing and drywall, you may have to adjust your miters a degree or two, and in this case a few different times before you get the right fit. And once everything is adjusted, you go check the fit one last time and glue and nail into place. And since this is a full install video, I'm just covering one by one, and if you guys want to know anything else, shoot me a message and I can start to cover some tasks a little bit more in detail and depth. Here you can see I'm trying to mark the rake angle of the skirt boards, and basically what I'm doing is I just took and marked the long point and the short point, and I took a piece of material and connected the dots, and that will give me my angle. I took that to the saw, got my miter cut, and fit perfectly. So this particular install, they wanted us to not have any base shoe. So I will also show you how to scribe that. And what you see me doing here is basically taking a piece of material, the same thickness as the height of the gap that you see down here at the floor, and run that along the entire piece of material. That will give you the contour of the floor. And obviously there are scribe tools made for this, but this particular install, I did not have all of my equipment on it, so I was using what I had. And then I take that material over, and because this is so long, I actually will use my power planer. And I use this method because it's not only very easy to do, but it's also easy to keep it super clean with the vacuum attachment. I also like to use this method because it's pretty tough to run a 14-foot piece of material through a table saw. You almost need 28 feet of room, and a lot of times a table saw will make a lot more dust in a room than this method would. I will say that I like to use this method mostly when I'm working off of a table, but I didn't have all my equipment at this job, so I was using again what I had. If you're taking off a lot of material, I would recommend using a table saw or something to get close to the line and then finish it out with this, if you have the opportunity to use a table saw. Now I have everything cut down to the line, and I just wanted to check my fit. No gaps at the floor, and good to go. And then I go back and I'll nail things off. And depending on the materials, again, you could use longer brad nails or finish nails. This particular material is only 1/2 inch MDF, so I'm using 2-inch brads, nailing into the studs, and being conscious of nailing patterns for aesthetics and for painting. So I wanted to get a little bit more in-depth on scribing, and you can see right there, I was checking the thickness, and it was basically the large end of a shim, and I would just take that and slide that on the floor with my pencil on top of it, and that would basically transfer the floor right to my workpiece. And then I take that material over to my work area. As usual, kick the vacuum on, and I'm using that planer here, and it's a little bit easier to see. A planer can only take off so much at a time, so I try to make almost a full pass if I've got a little bit more material to take off, and then I get closer and closer to that line as I move down the workpiece. And while I'm doing this, I slightly bevel the workpiece. So you can see I'm slightly angling the planer backwards, and that actually gives me a little bit more leverage to fine tune or adjust right to my line. And every once in a while, the hose gets in the way, so just be mindful of that while you're using a power planer. It would have been really nice here if I had a table, but I did not, so oftentimes I would use my saw stand or even the ledge or the handle on my pack out. And here I'm just showing how close you can get to the line. I oftentimes don't even need to use the micro adjustment on the power planer. I just tip the edge of the power planer and I can fine adjust while I'm working my way down the workpiece. Then I'll go check to see if it fits, mark my miter, and take it back to the saw. Something I wanted to point out is usually I'm not cutting at 45 degrees. Usually it's about a degree over because of buildup of corner bead and drywall. It just gets in the way. So 46 degrees usually. And then I work my way around the room, transferring that same measurement to the next workpiece, scribing it to the floor. like to apply glue to the back of the miter as well as the miter itself. That way things will hold in place down the line as well. And then when gluing a miter, I'm just going to apply glue to the entire miter. If it looks like it's a little bit thin, apply a little bit more, and then install your piece. And then when you're nailing everything off, make sure you're nailing the studs. Make sure everything's nice and flush up against the wall. And then oftentimes, if I don't want to grab my stud finder out, I just tap the wall, and you can tell where the studs are based on how solid it sounds or hollow. And here I wanted to show you a quick method for making a straight line with just your finger and the pencil. I basically just spaced it off my finger about 3/8, slid it across the bottom of the workpiece, and then took my planer, planed down to the line, cut my miter. This is just a temporary piece because it's going to go into where the cabinetry is, but I still wanted to get it ready, so then when the cabinets come in, it's there, ready to go, already pre-cut. And then one by one, I would work my way around the room, scribing to the floor and working my way around from piece to piece. Many times I don't even use my tape measure to mark out my baseboard. I just take and set it into place, mark the back side of my cut, and that will give me a nice accurate line to take to the saw. If I'm bulk cutting a room or a house, I will go through and measure everything and then take everything back to the saw. But because I'm scribing down to the floor, most times I like to mark in place just in case something moved. And with scribing to the floor, since this is a longer piece, I actually took and temp nailed it in, so it was easier to work with and I wouldn't have to hold up the workpiece the entire time I was trying to scribe it. And this particular piece happened to be the longest piece I was scribing, so as I was pointing out earlier, it can be really difficult to move these pieces around the room. So basically, I just put it on my saw stand, marked the cuts, and then scribed while it was on my stand with my power planer. I got all the cuts made, and then I just flip it over, and I've already got my scribe line made. So then I just take my power planer, plane down to my line, and here's a little music because high speed power planers are pretty annoying. And that's it for this one. We actually did install the shiplap you see right here, and that's gonna be on my next episode, so stay tuned for that. Basically just showing you, we did all the casing, all the doors, everything's raised up from 6'8" to 8 feet. It looks much taller. We will also be coming back and doing the closets. And we also did the bathroom. The large format tile made it much flatter in here, and we didn't have to scribe as much off the baseboard as we did with the LVP flooring. And then you see here that French door unit that we installed. We also did the window sills. That was just a simple install. We didn't share much about that. We have this entire room we did with shiplap on vertical. And then this bathroom over here, we also did that with vertical shiplap in the entire room. And on that next video, I'll show you how we did that surrounding the room and behind the door casing.